Alright, so it's John here with Just Thoughts. I want to go ahead and say thank you for the people that have viewed the content. If you guys ever have any questions, comments, or concerns, do not hesitate to give me a call, send me an email, engage with me on social media. I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the article, alright? All right. So first off, I wanted to say thank you for those who watch my content and donate to help keep me going. You have no idea how much I appreciate and how thankful I am for your participation. And for the people that send me emails about the prayers, know that I read every single one, and I'm thankful that you guys have enough trust in me to be able to have me pray for you. So we're in a time of difficulty and crisis, and during these times, what we usually do is we look towards leaders that seek to give us guidance and navigation, and I hope to be that for whoever watches this. Um, so we have to understand that we're in a situation where we have a choice to make about how we handle this crisis. Our choices are between an authoritative and communistic mindset that we see prevalent in places like China versus a more conservative and liberalistic mindset that we have in places like here, like the U.S. So this is a fight that the U.S. has won multiple times, and we don't plan on giving up the belt anytime soon. The first thing we have to acknowledge is that the common trend of societies is to fall, right? So every society before our society has risen and fell due to different variables. The Incans fell due to smallpox, and the Mayans fell due to overpopulation, environmental degradation, warfare. The Romans fell due to governmental corruption and overpopulation, over reliance on slave labor, fighting with the barbarians. So civilization's surviving, that's not the norm, right? It's actually a miracle that our civilization has survived this long. The fact that our lights still turn on and we have running water and we have a sanitation system, this is a miracle. And we really need to wake up and appreciate the things that we have here in the 21st century. We live blessed lives, whether we see it or not. But the main difference between those civilizations and our civilization now is that we're extremely deeply interconnected. The actions that we take literally affect people on the opposite side of the world due to how technology operates. And it's only going to get more connected as technology increases and the price of that technology drops and as more people become civilized. So I believe we have a built up lack of trust due to factors that I'll speak on. But this is something that we have to reestablish before we even continue. Um, those who have been, become billionaires and those that have, been elected into office, it's because somebody somewhere believed in you. And I believe the weight of that responsibility is also being taken for granted. And if we don't reconnect trust to the public between the people who are in power, we face more difficulties due to incompliances that will increase as more people realize that they believed in the wrong people. The actions that we take over the upcoming months will not only affect us, but it's going to affect our children and potentially our children's children. So with that in mind, it's time to put aside the differences that are, set to separate us and focus on how we can stand together, how we can stand strong for the people that are walking in our footsteps. So the actions that we take will set a precedent for how we handle future situations that are similar in nature. So we have spoken about the existential bottleneck that society will face, and I believe this could be the first ripple of it. We as a society have been playing a game that you can refer back into the article that I wrote called Dynamics of Competition versus Non-Competing Dynamics. But the idea is that we have created exponentially rivalrous systems or games for limitless resources with less than 1/10 of 1% of the global population in full control. That has to change. If those that are in control see greed and power as more important than civilizational survival, then that's a problem that we need to address. Another theory that I heard that has been coming for decades is that the crash of 2008 was actually a warning that the financial system, especially within the inequality of it, is becoming too powerful and leaving kind, intelligent, good-hearted people lacking the resources that they need to survive. This may be a symptom of a bigger problem in that the way the current market works, it's set for continuous financial and opportunistic growth for a few at the expense of a whole. This type of growth is obviously unsustainable. It's unsustainable because of a very short equation: slave like rivalrous dynamics amplified by exponential technology and financial equality equals self termination. You can find more information about this under the articles that I wrote called How Does Our Financial System Work and the Pareto Distribution of Inequality. I believe we need to implement some new anti-fragile systems to better handle turbulence that we're in, such as now. This is the first time in recorded history that we're not better off than the previous generations. We have all the necessary resources to live great lives, but due to factors like artificial scarcity and unfair rivalrous dynamics, the system is caving in on itself. The only real reason seems to be because of greed and power. And one example of an anti fragile system or tenet that we could introduce is something like a negative interest rate. To those whose net worth exceeds a certain amount, maybe $10 billion, or maybe we could heavily tax individuals whose net worth exceeds $50 million, or create a tax on every trade that happens on Wall Street and give those profits back to hardworking citizens through the form of some social safety net like universal basic income. It's my opinion that the crisis like this is the exact catalyst that might need to recognize the severity of the financial inequality that's happening here in the U.S. So instead of having that money sit and collect interest, why not lend it out to circulate it back into the global economy, or rather than hoard it, and why not put it to good use? So another theory that should be talked about more is the economic shift that's also happening out of exporting countries like China and into countries like Vietnam and Mexico and Japan and India. And India, they also have almost the same population as China. So that's something that a lot of people aren't aware of, or should be looking more into. One of the reasons is due to the communistic and authoritative political ideology of surveillance that China has in the tech and communication area, as well as the global economy realizing that using other countries not only incentivizes them monetarily, but it also encourages growth and economic well-being in those countries that have been lacking, especially because they don't have an opportunity to be able to engage in the global economy. So, after surveying more than 2,500 companies, 32% of those companies that were in China planned on moving out of China. So this may be the perfect storm for the global economy and the U.S. as the leader to uplift those countries that have not been given that opportunity to participate in the global economy and have been left behind. The long-term battleground in the decades to come will ultimately be for economic domination of Africa between the U.S. and China. And Africa's already started to move its sights towards the U.S. and away from China due to a stronger trust and allegiance to the U.S. Some people have asked, does the current system have to collapse? And my answer is that it's in my opinion that the current financial inequality system that we have set, it might need to, because it serves the few and doesn't help the majority. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot and go into my anti-hero mode so I can kind of give you an idea of what I think might be going on a globalist type level, right? So, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a nationalistic push against the globalist agenda that was present in the decade prior, right? So we have Trump and Johnson and Brexit. These are a few examples that have paved the way for those whose voices couldn't be heard. Now, if I was a globalist and I realized that nations like Hong Kong and Puerto Rico were fighting back against unfair subjugation, what I would do is introduce some kind of crisis to redirect attention and resources away from these efforts. I would use what I've coined Machiavellian power dynamics to stop any type of grassroots movement that was gaining momentum against my agenda. How I would do it is by using a method I'm calling psychological programming. So, psychological programming is when a group or nation prepares its citizens for a change or an ideological shift by introducing certain ideas that have a deeper psychological intention. For example, I received an email from somebody in China, and to save time, the guy basically ended the email with, the government says that the smog is the reason that we wear masks, but the real reason we wear masks is to silence us. When you don't see somebody's face, when you don't see somebody smile, when you can't see their lips, you forget that they have a voice, you forget that they are kind, you forget that they might have an opinion, and eventually you'll stop caring about those things, and all you will see are eyes watching you. The psychological effect this has had on my country has worked. We have given up safety for liberty, and all we see are eyes. That's how he ended the email. It kind of disturbed me a little bit. Last year, I think we could consider the situation that happened here in the U.S. where we had that flu go by as the psychological programming for what we're experiencing now. We had a flu that put everybody basically out of work and nobody complained about it. It was actually helpful because we, deserve a break every now and then. But it shouldn't be caused by the virus. I think that that's something that we should be given without, people's lives being at stake. So I think this was a form of psychological programming. If I was a globalist, what I would do is I would test out countries before I introduced it to the rest of the world. I would use North Korea probably as a first test because they're already in an authoritarian system. Then I would move to a larger population such as China to see if it worked on a larger scale. I would introduce some kind of social credit system that controlled economic prosperity as well as social survival. Then I would introduce some kind of bioweapon that couldn't be fought by protesters and force people to comply. I would use vaccines, so probably prevent immunity. I would increase the use of antibiotics to my population to multiply this effect. I would use the internet to spread fake campaigns and make people fearful and anxious and looking for answers, and use algorithms and deepfakes to amplify the confusion. Then I would remove the ability for war by moving the idea of war entirely to an online only location where all information was controlled and artificially generated. I would find people who were most at risk to create a revolution and psychologically torment them and starve them financially. Then I would dehumanize certain groups to put in us versus them to create an artificial desire for a one world government to protect us. It's in my belief that defunding the World Health Organization was the right move due to the agenda that the United Nations seems to be desiring. I wanted to mention you're not alone, right? I'm scared too, but I'm willing to fight for those who can. This is not the time to shut ourselves in. This is the time to stand up in solidarity for every nation, every tribe, under the guidance of God. It's time to open the nation back up, and or provide the resources that individual citizens need and deserve. If not, then we need to follow Puerto Rico and go to our local governments and millionaires and billionaires and honk our horns outside of their locations until they give us what we want. It's time to spread love and hope online, and it's time to pray for peace. And if not, then we're going to make Hong Kong look like a preview to our movie. If the powers that be want a revolution, let's give them a revolution. Of course, these are just thoughts. My name is John. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to give me a call.